Genshin has some really cool finales. Inazuma, for example, was phenomenal despite its terrible build-up. However, something like Fontaine, to me, had great build-up to an underwhelming finale. Yes, I love Fatui boss fights. Natlan was incredibly cool. Until it wasn't. This fiery compilation of friendship, silliness, colour, and graffiti happened to cultivate a strong emotional response from me, and then completely ruined it. Something else that would cultivate such a strong emotional response is you pressing that juicy subscribe button, and maybe doing the same for my Spotify artist and YouTube profiles of the same name. Plugging out of the way, let's plug your attention into my propaganda. Natlan starts off where most nations do, building sympathy for their main cast of characters. The biggest focus of this is Kachina, who is a kid struggling with insecurity and a crippling inferiority complex. It isn't the first time we've seen it in this game, and probably not the last, as this game is unequivocally repetitive. Despite this, I think the way she's handled is great, displaying Genshin's skills of world building when they're ironically trying not to build it. While helping with Kachina, we meet Kanich, Mualani, and the Great Dragon Overlord Ahau? His name's a bit long. These 3.5 characters pave our way to the Archon of the nation, who is surprisingly welcoming in comparison to somebody like Farina. I mean, she welcomes you, but not in the nicest way possible. While meeting all of these otherwise important characters, you are also introduced to multiple main concepts of the nation, such as the Pilgrimage, a tournament to determine the best of the best, the Night Warden Wars, the goal of the best, the Sacred Flame, the nation's defense from the Abyss, and, well, the Abyss. The Force was always mysterious, so giving it motivations, character, origins, and overall a dynamic was incredibly interesting and somewhat serviceable as closure for our long build-up of curiosity. I like nations that have clear yet complicated systems behind them, with a big focus on culture. Sumeru did this a lot, and it's nice to see it again here. Another important part of a good story, especially in this otherwise predictable game, are plot twists. People are meant to be resurrected if they win in the Night Warden Wars, and while everybody was, everybody wasn't. Kachina not only won the Pilgrimage, which helped her with her development, but then literally died. She didn't resurrect like she was meant to, what the flip? The chunk of these two acts are spent doing things in order to prepare to fish Kachina's soul back out of what is effectively the underworld, so corroded by the Abyss that she couldn't be resurrected. The highlights are Capitano coming into this game.
The Archon of Natlan. A force to be reckoned with.
Capitano shows what it means to be a Fatui Harbinger once again, being intimidating and powerful, highlighting what seems to be opposing forces. You don't need to be villainous to be an antagonist, so you'll need to stop cooking me for my takes on Arlecchino. The rescue is great because of the soundtrack, the cinematics, and overall world building. A very important thing, however, is the focus on visual and environmental storytelling. Usually, we get told and shown things in cutscenes, yet here we have a lot more things shown in the gameplay than what we're used to. While this isn't at its best yet, there is a clear effort to immerse the audience towards the end of the rescue as the Night Kingdom begins to close up, of course before our lovely Archon saves us. This shift is great, being a big reason as to why I love this nation's story, for the most part. While the game always had it, Natlan has done a good job. Fontaine tried to incorporate gameplay into dialogue, but Natlan has incorporated dialogue into gameplay, if that makes any sense. Overall, I like the first two acts, and I remember already thinking Natlan had more potential than the other nations. I will say though, Fontaine had the best. These are the best quests that have graced this game, maybe ignoring certain ones like Sumeru 5 or 2. Acts 3 and 4 of Natlan cooked, especially with the slight lack of direction that the story had. The main goal left from the first two was Natlan needing to assemble a group of heroes to fight the Abyss, and the moral debates and questioning presented between Mabuika and Capitano especially are phenomenal. Auroron was incredibly likable for me, as well as Silali. I didn't care for Chaska or her sister, but the moment in Act 4 was still fine for me. Conflict between characters was something I very much enjoyed in Inazuma and Sumeru. With Auroron and Capitano fighting against the group of heroes, it was very much entertaining. The time spent with Xilonen was also lovely, but Silali and especially Auroron were the peak of this arc of the story. Act 3 was a good hook for not only the Harbinger and his companion, but the moments of Mabuika and Capitano arguing, the silly plot twist, Auroron literally almost dying, Auroron tricking the Traveler and Paimon at the beginning, and more was just phenomenal. Seeing Capitano join the main cast but not be fully trustworthy was also nice, with him actually justifying and showing his power, not just stating it like Arlecchino did. Act 4, however, was just amazing. I stayed up one night and did both acts because the storyline was addicting, but the environmental storytelling of the whole Abyss takeover was great. The optionality was another thing Natlan focused on, with optional objectives throughout all acts, but here it was obvious. Permanent NPC deaths that you could change were one thing, but to see the dead bodies and literally skip an objective as Paimon gasped, it was just phenomenal storytelling that broke the mold of Genshin's flawed storytelling. The permanent consequences of the arc were great, and don't forget the amazing soundtrack at the end of the fight where everybody was cheering. It felt good, and most importantly, deserved to be taking Natlan back from the Abyss. It made Moeka likable and presented us with phenomenal yet terrifying sights of the vortex in the sky. Overall, I just loved seeing numbers change, the map slowly grow darker, dead bodies, and even the music. It was all perfect, and it was exactly what people expected from Natlan. I grew to love this cast, especially because it didn't move between groups, but instead expanded one existing cast. That's what Genshin struggled with in a lot of arcs, managing pretty well in Sumeru and Fontaine. It was most likely because of the length shortcomings back then. However, I'm a firm believer that Act 4 was too good. It felt so amazing in fact that it already felt like Act 5. Sure, plot points weren't resolved, like the final scene with Capitano or going back to fight the Abyss, but let's be honest, we knew they were going to win after such a powerful act in the story. It was hard to believe that they wouldn't. This is what caused Natlan to fall off. Wait, there's also an interlude quest. The quest was fine. It focused on characterizing the one member of the cast who lacked it, being a Yansan. This makes sense considering most interlude quests focus on one character primarily, though they're usually at the end of their chapter storyline. This is where it gets a bit weird. This quest makes Act 5 feel like an afterthought more than anything, and overall made me impatient yet uninterested. Typically, an Act 4 is the final straw, one final event that, while maybe solved, inevitably builds an insatiable tension that can only be relieved in Act 5. Wedging filler content in between and then having a few scenes at the end to refocus the story not only completely ruins the pacing, but well, it was already struggling to begin with. The quest was like a final nail in the coffin, all things considered. The final scene was cool though. Cool, but for the story it was somewhat detrimental. What the final scene of Act 4 did was build a level of suspicion, distrust, and in general, a lack of closure centered around Capitano. What the final scene of the interlude quest did was negate this to an extent. We literally had more reason to trust him. Of course, it didn't address the scene, so there was still confusion, but with there being like months between Act 4 and 5, it makes it hard to remain hyped already. This just cut mine in half. Cool scene, but was it good for the story's pacing? That's up to you to decide. Now, another important thing that Natlan has been doing was slowly building an otherwise dark atmosphere. The event that took place at the People of the Springs eventually grew to the Abyss takeover, which grew to what exactly? Nothing here, but that's okay, since the big events were in Acts 2 and 4 anyway, with an act in between them both. So Act 5 should have a very dark moment to conclude this theme, right? Right? Oh no. Act 5. While there was some goofy little power of friendship moments in Act 4, it was heroic. It was badass. This time, the quest does not pull off the power of friendship properly. In fact, nothing really happens till like a quarter through the quest. It feels like everything is controlled and there were no real threats or stakes like the other finale acts. Usually, if things are controlled, like in Liyue, you have a plot twist or two. However, this quest doesn't have that in the main conflict. The only twist is at the end, which, don't get me wrong, is a good twist, but I want a good finale in the finale acts. There was none of that, because that twist was just an epilogue. Instead, there was a hollow build-up through celebratory goodbye parties, speeches, name forgery, and conscious departures within the Night Kingdom. Not even the journey into the Night Kingdom was very intense, with more focus on lore and, I don't know, getting to the fight. Then, the boss itself is a character, or characters, we had never seen before within the main questline, with an undoubtedly cool intro though. It just feels like they were more focused on giving us lore than a cinematic, properly built up and fleshed out experience. It fell flat because of the lack of build up and stakes, with any momentum created by the story definitely being stopped by the interlude quest wedged in between Acts 4 and 5. It's like they have to quickly catch up to all the lore that they should have told us already. I went to Act 5 to have the finale. Filler content is good when it's after the main conflict, serving more as a way to reflect and cool down after a constant rush of content. However, it just served to slow the quest down when it was already near 5 hours. characters. Fontaine had the same runtime in its final act, but at least it was interesting, and I didn't even like that act that much. I wanted more direct conflict, but I still enjoyed the prior build-up and twists throughout it. Overall, just not a good final act. Might be the worst of them, honestly. Other problems I want to mention are related to things I've mentioned prior. I could mention the voice acting thing, but it's out of Hoyo's control. And now I'm recording me here because the script was written like a week or two ago, but it turns out a lot of translators and things is being replaced with AI things. Maybe it's kind of in Hoyo's control. Whoa. All I can really say is that it creates distance and reduces likability of certain characters, such as Ian-san, Kinich, and Kachina. The latter two had plenty of content in the first act, and Kachina in the last, but we can't say the same for Ian-san, since he really lacked dialogue in Act 1 and 2. My main problem isn't the cast, but actually with Mawika. Firstly, she didn't have as much of an iconic design as the other Archons, but that's far less important to me than the fact that she isn't really flawed. She's just too likable. I don't like how perfect she is because she truly is just an Archon. She's like a normal person. Everybody in the game is so bizarre and wacky, but then you got people like, I don't know, her? You got people like Mawika. She's just really normal. It's like Yoshikage Kira and JoJo's. I liked that Furina, Venti, Zhongli, and Raiden were flawed, even if they terribly screwed up Raiden. I liked that Nahida, even though she was almost a perfect Archon, was still weak, presenting a flaw with her as a person and her position in the world. She had space for development. She had to overcome it. Mawika was loving, loved, and lovable. She was responsible for everything, with the only threat, Capitano, having more of a positive arc instead of serving as a way to create a more interesting Archon and antagonist. The worst part is, Capitano's arc was amazing as is. Capitano would have been a phenomenal antagonist, yes, but we shouldn't forget how amazing of a support member he was in the story we got. It's just lame overall that Mawika didn't have any potential because of how she was made. Pretty much, I loved the hell out of the first 4 acts in Natlan. The cast, amazing. The storyline, amazing. Every character, besides Ian-san, had interesting grapples with morality, conflict, and general development, with entertaining moments like when Mualani said she almost got burned by Mawika during the Act 4 Abyss War. Unfortunately, the characters grew uninteresting when they had their best moments already, and served more as the Travelers' yes-men and cheerleaders within Act 5. I really hate Act 5, as it ruined something that was coming out to be phenomenal. The best. This is why I'd honestly prefer we go back to the Fatui antagonism. While characters like Capitano are phenomenal, we have our Lucchino situations, as well as far more dull and uninteresting conflicts due to the lack of Fatui presence. I really hope the second Harbinger coming for the Gnosis next will help to not only justify the decisions made within Act 5, but also bring this perk of the storyline back. With that, I'm done. Like, subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I love you all, and don't forget to check out my music, please, please, please!